Howdy, folks. It's me, Josh. Belgium is easily one of the weirdest countries in Europe to exist. It's a country that's ethnically, culturally, and linguistically polarized between French, Dutch, and Germans, has no real historical identity beyond the past 200 years, got obliterated in both world wars, and yet somehow still exists despite its own best efforts. So if Belgium is this freaking weird, why on earth does it even exist in the first place? And what if it didn't? Now, when I said that Belgium didn't have any historical identity beyond the past 200 years, that wasn't entirely true. Sure, they never existed as their own country, but they did sort of exist, merely as just the region of the southern Netherlands, which had been separated from the north ever since the 1500s. Back during the Protestant Reformation, the Protestant northern Netherlands revolted against Catholic Habsburg rule, and after a long war, secured the independence of the Dutch Republic. The Catholic southern Netherlands, however, remained under Habsburg rule, eventually becoming the Austrian Netherlands. And that lasted a good long while until some weirdo named Napoleon decided he wanted to cause some shenanigans and conquered all of the Netherlands, both north and south. And once he was defeated, the coalition decided that, in exchange for lands in Italy, Austria would give the Austrian Netherlands over to the Dutch, A, in order to compensate for Dutch colonies seized by Britain, and B, since the Dutch would be able to defend the territories much better against a possible French invasion than the distant Austrians. And so, the United Kingdom of the Netherlands was formed, with Willem I of the House of Orange-Nassau as its king. However, divides would end up growing between the Protestant North and Catholic South as Willem, a Dutch Protestant Northerner, began heavily clamping down on Southern autonomy. For instance, Catholics were barred from being ministers in the government, the Dutch language was forced upon the largely French and Flemish-speaking populations of the South, Southerners were disproportionately conscripted into the military, while at the same time were underrepresented in the government, Southern taxes were being sent to pay off Northern debts, and I could go on. Needless to say, the Southern population was not happy with Northern rule. And in 1830, after the success of the July Revolution in France, and inspired by some play that featured a lot of revolutionary and nationalistic themes, the people of the southern Netherlands rose up in revolt against the northern Dutch rule. Willem then decided to send a couple of his sons down to try to quell the revolts, when the rebels told Willem's son, also named Willem, that, if you guys just chilled out and let us do our own thing in the south, we'd calm down. Hey Dad, if you just chill out and let them do their own thing in the south, they'll calm down. No, I'm the king, and if I want them to be Dutch Protestants, they will be Dutch Protestants. So, yeah, the negotiations failed, and Willem then sent the army in to try to crush the revolts, which, largely because most of the army were Southerners, also failed. And this is when the rest of Europe noticed what was going on, and at first, fearing that if Belgium gained independence, France might invade, the great powers of Europe supported the Dutch. But then, Britain had an idea. What if we let Belgium become independent and then use them as a buffer state between France, Prussia, and the Netherlands, so that way no one will invade Belgium? And so it was. With support from the rest of Europe, the Kingdom of Belgium was created as a guy named Leopold became the first king of the Belgians. But, of course, Willem didn't like this, so he decided to invade before France got involved and he got spooked and went home. But even then, he still refused to acknowledge Belgian independence until, in 1839, in order to snag a bit of land from them, Willem finally recognized Belgian independence through the Treaty of London. And this treaty would establish Belgium as a perpetually neutral state under British guarantee, just in case, say, a European power would attempt to invade Belgium in order to use its easily traversable terrain in order to attack one of its neighbors. But I'm sure nothing like that would ever happen. But what if that changed? What if, in an alternate timeline, Belgium never existed. So there's a couple ways in which we can prevent the creation of Belgium, whether just by having Willem chill the heck out, or perhaps by having the European great powers get involved on behalf of the Dutch. Now, if Willem does, for whatever reason, decide to chill out, then you would see greater autonomy for the southern Netherlands, which would reduce desires for separatism. But on the other hand, if the great powers stepped in and helped the Dutch crush the revolts, then the opposite would happen, as the Dutch language, culture, and Protestant religion would continue to be pushed on the south, fueling further separatism. And you could end up seeing someone like Napoleon III later down the line attempt to exploit this and seize the French-speaking region of Wallonia. But much like most of his other attempts to expand into the region, this probably wouldn't end up working, possibly seeing Britain and Prussia stepping in and forcing him to back down. Meanwhile, the biggest change in this timeline would end up being in Africa. See, in our timeline, King Leopold of Belgium's successor, Leopold II, was super into colonies, and so went out of his way to send dudes into the Congo in order to create an independent kingdom for himself. But the thing is, the Congo was super rich in resources and was also in a very key location between many European colonies, and so everyone wanted to get their hands on it. And so, wanting to prevent a war, Otto von Bismarck called the Berlin Conference, which decided on how colonial boundaries in Africa would be drawn, particularly in the Congo. See, Britain, France, and Germany were all very interested in the natural resources the area had, and Britain and Germany saw the territory as potential means for connecting their other colonies by land. And so, since no one could agree who would get it, Leopold said, "Hey, I already got some dudes down there, why don't you just let me have it?" You know what? Sure, just let everyone else use it too. And so Leopold got the Congo. But if there's no Belgium, then there's no Leopold. And if there's no Leopold, then there's no Belgian Congo. So what the heck do they do about it? Without neutral Belgium holding onto the territory, tensions between European powers would ramp up over who's able to take control of the land. And the best solution they'd be able to come up with would probably end up being a partition, with each country getting roughly equal land and no one connecting their colonies. But if you thought this would be the end of it, oh no it wouldn't. Because after the ascension of Wilhelm II to the German throne, Germany began pushing for the idea of a Middle Africa, a German land empire stretching from coast to coast across Africa. But the thing is, there was a little thing called France in the way. But in 1911, after France invaded Morocco, Germany flipped out and demanded territorial compensation from France in Africa in what became known as the Agadir Crisis. And in this timeline, Germany might see this crisis as an opportunity to demand land in the Congo from France in order to connect the German Congo with German Cameroon. France, of course, would reject selling all of that valuable land to Germany, and with tensions already so high between Britain, France, and Germany over the Congo, this could see the crisis escalate much more, possibly leading to an early outbreak of World War I. Over this. And so, if things ramp up enough, Germany once again goes to war with France and attempts their Schlieffen Plan. In our timeline, Germany's Schlieffen Plan had initially called for an invasion of the Netherlands alongside Belgium, but after some changes in leadership, Germany scaled back the invasion to only go through Belgium in order to leave the Netherlands as a neutral port and keep the British from using it as a base of operations. But in doing this, they weren't able to utilize the Dutch railway system, which greatly slowed down the German invasion, contributing to the plan's failure. However, in this timeline, since Belgium doesn't even exist, Germany isn't able to scale down the Schlieffen Plan as they invade the entirety of the Netherlands instead. Whether this would be enough to save the Schlieffen Plan is debatable, as the Dutch would still fight back, but with access to Dutch rails, Germany would be able to move more troops much faster, which would greatly help them. And since Germany already almost made it to Paris in our timeline, it's very possible that the Schlieffen Plan could end up succeeding in this timeline, though, of course, not without its difficulties. And so, Germany is able to see a quick and easy victory against the Entente, as World War I ends before it even began in our timeline. And without the mass destruction that the war saw in our timeline, Europe ends up much more stable, as the war isn't remembered as the war to end all wars, instead probably just being remembered as the Congo War or something. But anyways, Germany, of course, seizes the land that it won from France in Africa, and probably even more beyond that, as well as annexing some portions of land from France and the Netherlands, setting up some puppet states in the land out of the Russian West, and things like the Russian Revolution never happen. Meanwhile, over in Austria-Hungary, after the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, Austria, with German support, still invades, but are able to face a much easier victory this time, rooting out Serbian and Yugoslav nationalism as Austria-Hungary manages to remain intact. But as Germany comes out of this Congo War, the dominant power of Europe, things shape out radically different from how they did in our timeline. But will Germany manage to hold on to its position of prominence? Only time will tell. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to stick around for more. And hey, you could also, maybe, subscribe or something. So that's it for today's video. Well, till next time, see ya.